Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Allplane podcast. Few segments of the aviation industry generate as much curiosity and fascination as that of executive aviation. The idea of flying in a private jet evokes a world of limitless luxury and extravagance. But how much of this corresponds to reality? And how does the world of executive aviation really work? We will answer these and other questions in today's episode of the podcast. But before that, just a short reminder that you can find all the previous episodes of the Allplane podcast, plus lots of interesting aviation stuff on our website, Allplane.tv. Today's guest is a successful entrepreneur that has disrupted the world of executive aviation. Adam Twidell spent a decade of his life on Her Majesty's service, flying C-130 aircraft for the Royal Air Force. After leaving the armed forces, he worked as a pilot for a corporate jet operator, NetJets. And it was then that Adam and his wife realized that the corporate jet market was ripe for disruption. So in 2008, they literally mortgaged their family home to create Private Fly. Private Fly is an online marketplace for executive jets. It allows you to book a private jet online as fast and easily as you would on a normal airline website. This way, they make private flying way more accessible and transparent. In 2018, after a few years of growth, Private Fly was acquired by a large American corporate jet operator, although it continues to operate autonomously from its offices in the UK and Florida. As an eminently digital business, one of Private Fly's main assets is its website. It is full of great content for anyone interested in the world of executive aviation. And every year it runs the Most Beautiful Airport Approach contest, in which I myself have participated a couple of times as a member of the jury. This online competition has become wildly popular and has got massive coverage all over the world. So few people are better placed than Adam to give us a panoramic view of everything that is going on in this most exclusive segment of the aviation industry. Without further ado, let me welcome him into this podcast. Hello, Adam. How are you?
Well, hello, Miguel. I am personally very well during these very difficult and complicated times for many people.
Indeed, just so different from the time we met a few years ago in the sunny island of St. Martin in the Caribbean, where we were both attending a conference, aviation conference, and then I had the chance to learn about Private Fly and this very exciting journey you've been into the last few years, because you actually did something very brave. You mortgaged your own house to set up a business that has been disrupting the executive aviation market since 2008, right?
Yes, well, my story in aviation started as a pilot. I was taught to fly by the Royal Air Force when I was at university in Edinburgh. And like so many of our colleagues in travel, I got addicted to the flying and the travel, and I had 10 great years with the Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom.
You were flying a Hercules, right? A C-130.
Yes, perhaps I was not talented enough to fly the fast jets, so I was put on an aircraft with lots of crew members to look after me. Great time, and included lots of operational experiences during my 10 years in the Air Force. But at the end of that, it was time to move on. And I joined the fractional provider NetJets in Europe, flying private jets. And I absolutely loved this new side of aviation that I'd never discovered before.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's good you mentioned NetJets, because before we go further and we get into the details of what you do at Private Fly and your story, I just wanted to ask you about the executive jet industry, because maybe, well, I'm pretty sure many people in the audience are not too familiar with this very, very special segment of the aviation industry. So basically, if you want to fly private, you have different options and there are different ways of doing it, right? So you can own the jets, you can join a fractional jet company as a member, or you can use a a charter broker like Private Fly, right?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to perhaps a holiday, a property, or indeed a boat. So if you want to invest heavily, then you would buy the asset itself, in this case, the private jet. But whether you operate one private jet or a whole airline of aircraft, you're under the same restrictions and controls by the aviation authorities. So it's a very complicated machine to operate. So what most owners do is they utilize a management company to employ the pilots and to do the maintenance and to do all aspects of the aircraft. So that's ownership. But of course, owning a private jet is very expensive. These aircraft depreciate extensively, often as much as 20% in the very first year and then 10% thereafter. So as a rough rule of thumb, after 5 years of owning a jet, half of the value has gone, and you haven't started paying for the cost of the pilots or the engineering, the landing fees, the fuel. So you can see it's a very expensive machine to own outright. So some people then decide to share the cost of ownership and join a fractional provider. Now, I mentioned NetJets, but in the States, there is FlexJet and other companies who would offer you a share of an aircraft. That way you can share the costs of ownership.
So essentially you pay a membership fee, right? And then you have an aircraft at your disposal whenever you need it, right?
Well, you're actually buying the aircraft. You're buying a share of the aircraft. So normally the smallest share you could buy in a fractional model is 1/16 of an aircraft. So you have to commit to that cost. And then, yes, there's an annual management fee and a monthly management fee. And of course, you have to pay every time you use the aircraft. And 1/16 share would equate to 50 hours. Mm-hmm. So each year you could fly your aircraft for 50 hours, of course, paying as you go. So again, if you want to be a little bit more prudent with your funds, then the next management style is a jet card. So you would buy a number of hours and commit to that cost. So typically, jet cards come in 25-hour blocks. So you would buy 25 hours of aircraft time. Now that's at a known price. And every time you want to fly, the aircraft would be available to you within a set period of time.
Mm-hmm. And the other option is actually to broker an aircraft whenever you need it, right? Without further commitment.
Well, yes. This is, again, if we refer it to a holiday property, this is so you can experience a new property every time you go on holiday. Or if you do like one particular holiday house, you can return to it time after time. But you're not paying the upfront cost when you leave the property. You don't have to worry about the maintenance. So charter is on demand. So you choose when and where you want to fly and on what type of aircraft. And it's also very cost effective because by not owning the asset, somebody else is paying for the depreciation, for the pilot's salaries, for the maintenance, and you're helping the owner offset some of those costs by chartering the aircraft.
And here is where Private Fly comes into the picture, right? So you are a sort of online marketplace where you can aggregate capacity from many different operators. Then people can book executive jet trips digitally on your app or your website, just as you would in a normal airline website, right?
Well, it seems very normal now to think about looking online, comparing options, and making that educated choice. But back when we started looking at the project in 2006, nobody was offering this service online. And it was a very fragmented industry with customers on one side and the huge numbers of aircraft operators and owners on the other. And looking as a pilot, I knew that the passengers I was flying knew that charter was very cost effective, but they were off put because the industry wanted to tell them that it was complicated and that you needed an expert to help you. And I actually knew that wasn't true. It was very easy to fly a passenger from A to B. And all we needed to do was track where all these aircraft were, understand about pricing, and showed that in an informative way to the customer, and let the customer make the buying decision about which aircraft they wanted to fly. And of course, I wanted to provide 24 hours expertise service, because it's very important, I feel, not to control the user's journey in private aviation. Our customers can use our app, our website, or they can phone us. We even have some customers who tend to write to us, and that's quite amazing for our younger team when they actually receive a letter in the post from a customer. But if you understand our customer base, you'll understand that they want to control how they communicate with private fly.
Mm-hmm. Even then, you provide this customized personal service, but you also get some customers that they just book the whole trip 100% online, right? You, in a previous conversation, I remember you told me you have even seen people booking trips worth $500,000 direct on the app on one go.
Well, this was as you start a company and you develop it, you do have some amazing surprises along the way. Of course, running a company is full of ups and downs, but on one particular day, I remember our app, which was in its early stages, had a booking for a Boeing business jet. This is a VIP version of a very well-known aircraft. Now, the Boeing business jet is an expensive aircraft to charter, and so when that flight booked for $500,000, we didn't expect to see the money in the bank account. But the next day it popped in, and that was a confirmed booking by an app. So at that point, I realized there was no limit to what you could sell online.
Mm-hmm. Because your entrepreneurial journey they started in 2008, right? So then you grew this business over the next few years, and then you got acquired by a US company in 2018, right? And now you're part of a larger group that covers the whole spectrum of executive aviation. But you specifically, Private Fly, you continue to work autonomously, based out of the UK, but you have offices in Florida as well. The US, obviously, a huge market for private aviation. And yeah, so you basically, you're part of a larger group, but you work autonomously.
Yeah, when you summarize the Private Fly story like that, I have to reflect on, it's been quite an amazing time of high growth. We started the company with a belief that we wanted to put the control of the booking in the hands of the clients, and we wanted to educate them about what happens in the industry. So it was very much a content-led online digital company. We started gaining some great traction in the UK, but we funded the company, my wife and I, by selling our family house, and we realized at some point, because we were being successful, we would be copied by other companies, which of course is normal. And if we needed to take the company to the next level, we would have to raise some funds. So we raised £2 million from a number of angel investors, and we were able to use those funds to employ some key members of staff with languages and translate and localize the site for the many different countries that we have in Europe. And again, we were fortunate to have great success, and the company continued to grow and gain momentum. The issue we next had was what to do with the American market, and we realized eventually that to to get a foothold in the States, we had to have people on the ground. So we chose Florida as our location, and we opened a sales office in Fort Lauderdale. And we actually were able to use our own profits from the company to do that expansion. We did look at further funding, but decided to do it from within. Now, as we continue to grow, of course, many competitors were interested in acquiring us, or at least finding out what we were doing differently. So we ran a process, and we had a number of different companies involved. But in the end, we were very pleased to be acquired by one of the leading private aviation groups, Directional Aviation. We're very fortunate that Directional is led by a pilot, a serial entrepreneur. Ken Ritchie is our chairman, and Ken is ultimately an entrepreneur at heart and continues to be so. So whilst we have many different brands within One Sky, the flying side of the company, and the wider group, we all run independently, of course, speaking to each other, but I feel that we haven't lost any of the entrepreneurial spirit that we had way back in the early days. It's still very much there.
Because you introduced a number of, let's say, novelties in, well, I don't know if they were novelties, but certainly you provided another level of transparency and ease of access to certain services. Like, for example, the empty legs. Can you explain for the audience what's an empty leg?
Well, a private jet behaves very much like a taxi does. It takes passengers from A to B, drops the passengers off, and then drives or flies to the next location. Now, the ultimate aim, like Uber, is to have technology to reduce the positioning, those empty journeys. And that's very much what we've done with our technology. However, those empty legs can be sold at discounts because the aircraft is flying anyway between those two airports. So whatever funds you can sell a trip at is a bonus.
So let's sorry, let me stop you here 1 second, because just to put it in practical terms. So let's say you have someone flying from London to Geneva on a private jet, and that person stays there overnight, but that jet needs to do some other service the next morning. So this jet might be flying back empty to London the same day. That empty flight is actually what you put in the market, and you could, in theory, you can book for a reduced price, right? Because that's capacity that is not going to be used otherwise.
Yes, very much like a hotel room. If a hotel has not sold a number of rooms by 7 p.m. in the evening, they might then try and sell those hotel rooms to a discount site just to get somebody to pay some amount of money for it. Now, unfortunately, a private jet empty leg is not as stable as a hotel room in terms of it can change. Now, your primary customer, in your example, who just flew from London to Geneva, might decide, actually, they don't want to depart London at 10 o'clock, they want to depart at 5 p.m. Or indeed, they might not want to fly to Geneva at all. They might want to fly to Zurich instead because the meeting has been changed. So I think if you're committing to an empty leg, you also have to have a backup plan. And we always make that very clear to our customers who are buying empty legs. Actually, empty legs is less than 5% of the flights that we do. We specialize in dedicated charters where you know absolutely that aircraft is going to be there for you and you can control it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I've been looking at the pricing on your website. I've been trying to understand a bit better the value of this executive jet flying. And actually, for example, on privatefly.com, there's a very user-friendly interface, just like that you would find in an airline website. And I introduced a theoretical trip from London to Dubai in July with a mid-sized jet, which I guess it's the minimum you need for this length of trip. It can carry up to eight people, and it's 50,000 euros one leg, but that's for 8 people. So actually, if you compare that with flying business class on BA, the same amount of people, that would be between 30 and 35,000 euros. So it's a little bit more expensive, but not so much. So I guess that's one of the what's an important sale argument is actually that if you are flying a group of people, it can actually be quite a cost effective once you factor in all the flexibility, the comfort.
Yeah, and this is why many corporates consider private aviation a business tool. I think in the vast majority of cases, it's always going to be more expensive than an airline, no matter how many passengers you put on the jet. Because, of course, when you charter an aircraft, that whole aircraft is yours. So it's the same price if you have 1 or 8 passengers flying in your example. But if you're a business and you're flying your senior execs, especially at this time of the coronavirus, being able to access the aircraft quickly with limited exposure to other people, to be able to control the time that you depart, to be able to control the environment on board. So you can talk about the meeting that you're just about to fly into, or you can debrief it on the way home without worrying about who's looking at your laptop from the seat behind or who's overhearing the conversation. So there are many benefits to private aviation. I think it's always generally going to be more expensive than airlines, but for some high net worths and corporates, they see the benefits on that basis, as you described, that it's comparable at times to airlines if you have max capacity within the aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Actually, you mentioned the pandemic. We had not got to this topic yet, although I guess we have to mention it somehow because it's the topic of our times. And I was wanted to ask you, how do you see this pandemic affecting the long-term prospects of the executive aviation market? Because I guess there are two contradictory effects here, which I don't know which one will be stronger. One is that people are obviously traveling less. But the other one is that, as you mentioned, some people, obviously, a relatively small number of people, but that might include many of the people that are currently flying on business class or first class in some long-haul routes. They might actually consider private flying because of all the risks of being exposed to other people, having a more secluded experience. So how do you see these two effects working out here in combination? Who's going to prevail?
Well, I think like many industries, we're in very uncertain times. But if we could look back at previous events, we can see that private aviation normally has a surge of demand when the airlines are disrupted. Now, previously, airlines have been disrupted by bad weather, when snow and ice hits certain areas, when airlines have employment issues with pilots going on strike, or indeed the air traffickers causing issues for an airline schedule. Whenever there's disruption to airlines, we see private aviation stepping in and filling the gaps. Now, I think we all understand that when an airline hasn't flown for months, it's going to take a long time for that airline to recover and gear back up. Pilots have to be retrained. Aircraft have been on the ground, will require heavy maintenance. And indeed, most airlines are not going to have the same schedules as they did before. They're going to be cutting back to the most profitable routes. So I think of all of those factors combined with the health, there is a good chance that, especially in the charter, where customers might be using private aviation for the very first time, we could possibly be more protected. Certainly on board the aircraft that we are utilizing, we're ensuring that the interiors are disinfected with products which kill the virus for up to 2 weeks, and indeed the aircraft are cleaned after every flight. And we're really looking at the whole customer journey to reduce the impact of the likelihood of picking up coronavirus. So there's a lot of unknowns. but ultimately so many industries follow the economic cycle. So certainly some uncertain times ahead for the industry.
Mm-hmm. I take this opportunity to recommend to anyone interested in this topic to check out your website, privatefly.com, because there you have a series of posts that are explaining how you clean the aircraft. Well, you or the operators in this case, because you're the aggregator, but there's a lot of very interesting information in there about how the different private jet operators are adapting to the pandemic, how they are cleaning aircraft, and all this information related to these very strange times we're living through. Actually, going back to the booking process, so it's like that of an airline in many ways. There's one thing though, it's instead of selecting the type of seat, you select the type of airplane. There are different categories of airplane that you can book based on it's mainly the size and the range of the aircraft, right? Can you elaborate a bit more about how you divide this market in different categories? I think there's as you mentioned earlier, there's the larger aircraft, the VIP converted airliners. That would be basically like a commercial aircraft that has been converted to carry a small number of people in all comfort. And then they can go all the way down to very light aircraft. Some of them are not much larger than a private car. So how you divide this market? Can you explain us the different categories and the different segments?
Yeah, of course. Well, let's start at a journey that you want to fly between two places which doesn't have an airport at all. So you might choose to fly in a helicopter. So we can't forget the helicopter sector is very important for those types of journeys, especially where you're flying to a remote location, which isn't served by an airport. After helicopters, you have a section of a group of aircraft with propellers. Now, recently in Europe, the turboprop, single turboprop aircraft have been allowed to fly commercially for the very first time. So we have aircraft like the PC-12 with just one engine, which is a turboprop at the front. And that is a very cost-effective way to fly privately. And the added benefit is they can utilize runways which are either very short or indeed with the PC-12, you can land on a grass runway. Mm-hmm. So that's helicopters and then propeller aircraft. And then we go up into the jet, to private jets. Now, the entry-level jet, they're called very light jets, or VLJs for short. Now, the experience that you have on board a very light jet might be similar to getting into a London black taxi. It's a small cabin, typically with 4 seats, and you'll have limited facilities. Some do not even have a toilet. So they're ideal for trips. So you're in Barcelona today, so if you wanted to fly to Palma, a fairly short trip, just with 2 or 3 people, the VLJ would be an obvious cost-efficient way to fly. Mm-hmm. For longer trips, or when you need the facilities of a toilet or a catering on board, then you would move up into the small jet category, and then into the mid-size category. Now, 2 things are happening as you step up the categories. One, the cabins are getting larger, so you're beginning to stand up taller in the cabin, because of course, on some of these light and small jets, you could not stand up tall. I'm 184 centimeters, just 6 foot. So I would need to get into a mid-size aircraft before I can stand without hunching my back. And I think many customers are quite surprised when they fly on a private jet for the first time. Actually, some of the entry-level aircraft are quite small.
Yeah, indeed. I had the same impression when I was in the cabin. I think it was a Honda jet some time ago. It was quite small, much smaller than I expected. But of course, it still has all the flexibility advantages of a private jet, but it's not as as spacious as many people expect. So we are now in
Yeah.
the
So
yeah.
as we are growing into those larger sectors, the cabin size are getting larger. The facilities are improving, but also the range of the aircraft. They can start flying for longer distances. So the mid-sized cabins are capable of flying across Europe for up to 4 hours with plenty of baggage space. Because of course, as you move up the categories of aircraft, the baggage facilities improve as well.
So
now, if you wanted to fly longer than 4 hours, for example, if you now want to fly from Barcelona to Dubai, you're looking at those larger aircraft. Now, anything further, you're into the large cabin or the long haul aircraft. Now, at this category of aircraft, where you have products like the Bombardier Global and the Gulfstream, you might have heard of the Gulfstream G6 or the G650. These are the top of the range aircraft that are capable of flying to up to 14 hours. So anywhere in the world with one fuel stop. Recently, last week, we flew a family repatriating to New Zealand from London with one fuel stop in Kuala Lumpur on the way. So they have the reach of a modern airliner such as a Dreamliner.
And above that, you then would have already the converted airliner.
Yes, I mean, when you go above the long haul and the large cabin aircraft, you're into a very small sector of private aviation, which is the VIP airliners. Normally, these are flown by heads of states, by presidents and royal families, and of course, some very high net worths would own them as well. But it's a small sector. They can be used for corporate events. If you were taking a roadshow, or if you wanted to take a number of your employees on a trip, some of these airliners are converted to all business class seating. So as well as some aircraft having very small numbers of seats, for example, 20 in a whole Airbus, some are kitted out in business class seats for a more efficient but VIP way of flying a larger group of passengers.
Yeah, I'm going to post a link to an article I wrote about these converted airliners, VIP airliners. I wrote it for CNN a few years ago, and there are plenty of pictures there. So I'm going to post a link in the transcript of this call so that people can get an idea of how these look like in the inside. So it's
interesting, isn't it, Miguel? Because often when you talk about private jets and private aviation, that's the first image that most people would have in their mind. Luxurious bathrooms, different cabins. But actually, the majority of people who are flying on private jets are at the other end on those very light and small jets. So whilst the public has this image of private aviation being a very luxurious way to travel, actually, for the majority of passengers, the luxury is being able to depart at the time that you want to fly at and fly between the airports that you're choosing rather than sticking to an airline schedule.
Indeed. And actually, you are offering your service as well as a white label through some general travel portals, right? So you can actually book private jets on mainstream travel online channels.
Yeah, this started at the beginning of the company when any new startup, they have the same challenges. How are we going to find customers? Now it's especially hard to find new customers when your client base are high net worths and execs at large companies. These customers are guarded by people. You can't just cold call them. You can't make meetings. So how are we going to get in touch with them was the problem that Private Fly had at the beginning. So what we had in our business plan, there was 50% of our customers would be direct through retail channels and 50% would be through partnerships. So we partnered with concierge services, hotels, partners who already had customers who would be flying by private jet, but would be booking it through another channel. So we were able to offer concierge services and high-end travel agents the ability to book private jets for their clients, but using our technology and Private Fly's expertise behind the scenes. As Private Fly grew, our direct sales grew rapidly, and the partnership channel reduced in size. So at the moment, our partnerships are roughly 10% of our revenue. Still very important to us, and we have some great relationships with some airports and travel consortiums like Virtuoso. So we enjoy those partnerships, but over time, they've become a smaller part of their overall revenue.
Mm-hmm. One area where you definitely stand out is actually digital channels. Your website has a very interesting blog, as I mentioned earlier, where you can learn a lot of things about private aviation. Even if you don't fly private aviation, it's very interesting as a place where you can get all sorts of information. And you also run a very successful initiative, which is called the Most Beautiful Airport Approaches. It's got plenty of coverage from some of the main media outlets in the world, and it remains widely popular. You run it every year, and I must say I've been member of the jury a couple of times. And so can you tell us a bit more about this initiative and how this has been very important as well for you to get your brand better known out there and get lots of media coverage?
Actually, there's a lovely story behind this campaign. In the early days of Private Fly, when we were a small team, we were all, what united the team and what still does is that we're all passionate about aviation. I've made it a very strong point of our recruitment process. I want to employ people who love travel and in particular love aircraft and are very knowledgeable about them. So we all came into work. There was less than 10 of us at the time. And on the television the night before, there'd been a program about the 10 most dangerous airports. I'm sure a lot of people have seen similar programs. And we were all discussing which one of those airports that we would have the courage to fly into. And it was actually our bookkeeper at the time who challenged us and said, well, I'm not really interested in danger. I like to fly to places which are beautiful. Where are the 10 most scenic approaches that you can fly to? And we started listing them, and that was a blog that afternoon. And that weekend, we suddenly found that a few of the broadsheet papers in the UK had covered the story. And I think what was particularly interesting was that it was a very visual campaign where we brought back some of the enjoyment, some of the glamour of flying, which had been sucked out of the industry with so much attention on low-cost carriers. So we were able to bring something very visual and celebrate flying. So that was a campaign which started in a very entrepreneurial spirit and grew from there. And then, of course, we asked leading travel experts like yourself to come up with a short list of airports each year, which the population could and our users could vote on. And it's something that we've really enjoyed seeing develop. And it's a really a tremendous way of celebrating flying.
Mm-hmm. Let's hope we can celebrate flying again sometime soon. And it's certainly been a pleasure having you on the podcast here today. And hopefully we will be able to have you again here on a conversation at some point in the future to continue digging into this very interesting, fascinating world of private aviation, Adam.
Well, thank you, Miguel. It's been really enjoyable speaking to you. And I think what we've learned about aviation over the 110 years, it's always been a cycle. There's always been ups and downs. But actually the benefits that flying can bring both to the leisure travel and the corporate travel are very evident. So we all look forward to the day soon that restrictions can be lifted and we can all get back out and start visiting the many wonderful places that there are.
Let's hope so. And have a great day and stay safe, Adam.
And to you. Bye for now.
Bye.